response to Wyoming Gun Project saying that the SIG P320 has an inherent design flaw, as he literally pulled the trigger to get the gun to an unsafe point, then to fire it and say, oh, it has a major design problem. I'm going to prove why he lied, why it's misinformation, what he said, and to basically break it down to where hopefully all of you can understand why what he did is wrong and why this test isn't what's going on. First and foremost, I'm not a SIG fanboy, never owned a SIG. Anyway, so what people like me are actually alleging is going on with the SIG, just so everybody can be on the same page and understand why we're having the accidental discharge argument, is that you'll have zero input into the trigger, which means there's no pre-travel taken up at all. There's zero input in the trigger. The firing pin safety does not reset properly, so it's in the upward position, clearing the striker to fire. And then when you set the gun down, the slightest bit of input is causing the seer to slip off of the striker. SIG is alleging that's impossible. People like me are alleging that is very possible. That is the actual argument. The argument is not to see if you can pull the trigger to a certain point and the gun actually fires. Good old Jake break. What I'm going to do is just demonstrate that you can actually do this. You can actually do this at home with any pistol that you choose to select. You're always going to have these exact problems. So, I have a screw pulling the trigger, just as he did. You'll notice that it's pulling the trigger to the rearward position. When you pull the trigger back, and the reason this is important is because whenever you pull the pre-travel out of a handgun trigger, what you're doing is you're disengaging all the safeties in the handgun. So once you pull it back to the wall, you've cleared every single safety in the handgun, because the handgun thinks, okay, my trigger's being pulled back, it's time for me to fire. Once you hit the wall, you have a very short amount of wall. You have a lot longer wall in the Glock, which is another reason I like this gun. But you have a very short wall, and once you start engaging that wall, as you can see, I've got the screw pulling out the pre-travel. Once you start engaging that wall, what you're going to do is you're starting the firing sequence. So what's happening in the gun as I'm screwing in past the wall is it's slowly pulling down the seer. By pulling the trigger farther and farther back, the closer you get to firing. So now we're going to recock the gun. We're going to reset it, and it just reset. I actually have two very microscopic marks in the bottom of the trigger guard I can use to kind of time this, so that I can explain that you can actually do this with any gun. Because the trigger is pulled back, this gun is ready to be fired. So now I'm going to screw it in some more, and that's right before the firing point. So now we're going to see with the Glock if we can move the slide down. Oh, it fired! Oh, but wait a minute. You're saying, well, I know you got the Glock to fire, and I know the SIG P320 fired, but Glocks don't shoot people at random, because we're not arguing that the trigger is being pulled back. We're arguing that the trigger has zero input, the safety hangs to the top in the P320, and the fucking striker drops and shoots an airman in the goddamn chest. Okay? Think about this, guys. The airman, according to the story, if alleged is true, and this is all alleged, the airman had his pistol inside a holster. He hits a release button on his holster, takes out the loaded handgun with one in the chamber while it's in a holster, zero input being put into the trigger, sets it on the table, the weapon then discharges, impaling him in the chest and killing him. People like me are saying the reason that happened is because SIG's passive firing pin safety fails at random. And on top of that, the striker, the angle of the striker and the angle of the seer in the SIG P320 is incorrect, and it causes it to slowly work off or not raise completely up or not properly reset. Wyoming's test is flawed. The reason it's flawed is because it's still a completely functional handgun. Just to show any of you naysayers, I'm actually going to do the same thing he did though. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a primed 9mm He also shot 45. We're going to reset the trigger. Trigger reset. Now this gun, I'm right at the point where the trigger should break. If I move it, it should make a loud pop noise. I might not have, you don't have to back up, John. We're clear on that one. We're going to screw in the trigger more. I have my thumb behind the slide just in case. It cleared that. Part of me is wondering if I actually reset the trigger. Oh, I didn't reset the trigger. That would be why it's not firing. Oh, so it clicked, it just reset. It shot! Now, why did it shoot that time? Well, it shot because this screw is pulling the trigger back until it fucking fired. This is a lot louder than I initially thought it would be, and that's because of the muzzle brake. I have this gun again with another blank cartridge in it, and we're going to see if we can move the slide on a Glock Gen 3 clone, which has no history of having accidental discharges, and it will fire. Jesus, this scares the shit out of me. I would never do this test. I would recommend you don't either. Jesus. Pause it again. I'm going to demonstrate with a blank. Don't ever attempt this test. It's extremely dangerous. One of the things that you need to remember about blanks, these are still dangerous. Even though there's no projectile, it's a significant amount of pressure, and you can cause seriously bodily harm to yourself. We're just going to do this to demonstrate that, yes, you can do this. I'm so scared because this is so dangerous and so stupid to do. Don't ever do this. We're going to see now if we can cause the same thing to happen. So this is a Glock. Never had any accidental or UD discharge problems before. It's a Generation 3 clone. I'm just so scared to death of this damn thing. Manipulate the slide. Just pause it. I'm not going to do this. All right. Are you filming? Mm-hmm. All right. I have another blank loaded up in here. We're going to demonstrate that you can actually do this with any handgun on the market. Now, this may be a PSA dagger, but you can actually do this with your handgun at home because literally every handgun will fire if you pull the trigger, unless it's maybe a high point, which, you know, it'll fire most of the time if you pull the trigger. So we're going to start engaging it into the safety seer anymore. I'm so scared. This is just a dumb test, guys. We have a blank loaded in here, no trigger pull. I'm too scared, I'm chickening out. I have to deactivate. Sorry, baby. I'm going to do the same thing. You know, you can do this at home with your... Are you filming?
Yeah, I just...
Okay, good. I'm going to do this. I'm going to demonstrate this again. I figured I might as well put safety glasses on for this. You can do the same thing with any singular pistol on the market. All you have to do is do the exact same setup that he did, and you'll have the exact same results that Wyoming did. I'm going to get the trigger to reset. It reset. All right. I've turned this... Now I have a lot of seer engagement. All I'm going to do is I'm going to touch the side of this frame, and I'm going to get this gun to have a UD. I don't even want to do this, to be honest. Oh, shit! It fired! Because if you pull the fucking trigger on a handgun back, the handgun can fire. You don't have to be a genius to figure that out. So anyway, that's the video to disprove that what Wyoming did was actually an accurate test showing the UDs and the SIG. I want you guys to understand, I'm not saying there's not a problem with the 320. I genuinely believe there is. I believe that the two main issues, I believe that in the slide, I think that the passive firing pin block is hanging up inside the SIG, and I believe that over time the seer itself is slipping off of the striker. So did he lie to you? It's hard to say. One of the things I realize about this video going viral is how little people actually understand about why handguns shoot, why they go off, how they actually work, how they actually function, right? Just so you guys understand my background and how I kind of knew what Wyoming did was wrong. The first gun I actually got was a PSA dagger. It was actually a different one. I went through a lot of parts and changing the trigger geometry and adjusting it, and then I found out about Johnny Glock, who started saying, hey, don't do anything you want to a Glock. Make sure you keep it inside safety parameters. Make sure that the crucifix isn't getting past the trigger ledge on the take-up. Make sure you don't take too much take-up out of the trigger. Why would you anyway? Make sure that you have the right geometry on the right parts. Make sure that you're polishing the right things the right way. Make sure that your angles are safe inside your gun. And again, this isn't a defensive pistol. If it was a defensive pistol, I would probably honestly leave it stock or get a professionally done trigger. I wouldn't do my own trigger work. But even in the case of the SIG, you can actually repeat this exact same problematic function with any pistol. The pre-travel in a handgun is all of your safety features. You're disengaging every internal safety because you're pulling the trigger. Understand? You're pulling the trigger back. Once you hit that wall, the wall is the feeling, what you're actually feeling inside mechanically. What the wall actually is isn't a magical 2x4 wall that Jorge built in your house. The wall is actually, the seer is starting to move off of the striker so that it can go forwards. It's literally, the seer is starting to slowly slip off. So as he was hitting the wall and pulled back 1 millimeter, what he actually did was he pulled it back to where there was just a little tiny ledge. And then the slightest bit of torque between the slide and the frame made it slide forwards and fire. Again, the best part about my test and why I just showed you guys is you can actually do it on any handgun and find out that every handgun can have UDs under these circumstances. The main thing I want you to remember about the SIG and what we're alleging with the SIG, and this is all still, no one's really scientifically proven it yet. I have some ideas on how to prove it. I think maybe get a 320, shave out the side of the frame, or the side of the slide, excuse me, with a precision hole and just start shooting it. Shoot the hell out of it. Every single shot, look and see if the firing pin block safety did in fact go down or if it stayed up. If the safety hangs, then it becomes a much simpler valve. Then the last thing we have to prove on the SIG p320 is that the angle between the seer and the striker, slowly but surely, as an officer's walking around, that striker is slowly pulling down off of it. Remember, the trigger being pulled is what clears the passive firing pin block. We kind of, from his video, we have a theory, but it's really not an actual scientific test because it's a test that we can do with any gun. As a matter of fact, you can do it with the Gen 3 Glock clone, any Gen 3 Glock clone, really any clone of any handgun. You probably do it with a damn Desert Eagle. Don't do it to a Desert Eagle. And I guess the last thing I have to do is say, Jesus forgive me for defiling thine holy handgun, the Glock Gen 3. By putting a screw through the frame, I knew it was wrong, but I had to prove a point. Sorry, Father in heaven. Other than that, that's where we're at. That's the real problem, right? Wyoming's test isn't an actual test. It's getting a lot of results. I would be shocked if SIG doesn't actually sue him and win this lawsuit. The real problem I have with his video is now it's going to undermine the actual arguments of people like me. They're going to be like, oh yeah, like Wyoming when he got his ass sued off for being dumb and thinking, oh, I found the UD problem. You're one of those Wyoming lunatics. No, I'm not. I'm a reasonable person who thinks that the SIG p320 isn't safe. Just to be clear, one more time, I think I said at the beginning of the video, I advise you to buy 1911s and Glocks, and preferably Glocks, not 1911s. Never owned a SIG. Don't give a shit about the company. Think they're a bunch of douchebags. And I probably will make another video ranting on how I think the M7 is the worst U.S. Army decision since the M14. Or is it the same Army decision as the M14? Hey, look up some M14 videos. Anyway, that's X signing off. See you.